Hi, here we are again in the Honging School, and in this series we're going to look at all the different Chinese weapons, so all the different Kung Fu weapons. We have an awful lot of weapons. Actually, we have more than 50. But we could say that there are 5 or 6 weapons which are standard weapons, so we're going to look at those first. And the first one we're going to tackle is the standard Chinese army knife, or the single broadsword. So in Mandarin this is called a Dao, and in Cantonese we call it Dan Do, single broadsword. So there are many different types of broadswords which you can get nowadays. So I'm going to show you some of the different ones. This is one of my own that I use. This part of a double set that I use when I compete. This one's pretty solid, really nice, strong broadsword. Used a lot, this one. This is probably getting on for 10 years old, but it's in real good condition still. I have another set of these which are maybe 20 years old, and then they're not in such great condition. But these last pretty well. A lot of what you'll find on the market nowadays, this kind of thing, so this is much softer and floppier. See? This is just like what we call a floppy sword. So this is like some cheap alloy, kind of sprung, so it has this. See? So the idea of this is that you can kind of make a nice sound with it when you make a strike or up in the air. This is more for demonstration purpose than for practical use. So if you were going to go to war, you would want one of the broadswords I just showed you, or the one I'm going to show you in a minute. This is just like what we call an exhibition weapon. So, but most of what you'll find in the West, if you order online or something, you're going to get something like this, or maybe a little bit more of a solid model. This is a little bit bigger as well. See, so quite a size difference in these two. This would be okay for a relatively small person like myself. And some of my bigger students, they would use something like this. The Bagua people, they have another sword like this, a broadsword, but it's a two-handed thing, and it's a monster. It's like actually taller than I am. So, but this is just a single-handed regular broadsword. But this one is also a bit floppy. There you go. There's a nice sound that you get on the TV when you watch someone get a blade. So this is just flicking the fingers. But don't do that. You need pretty strong fingers to do that. But this one is also quite bendy, see, quite flexible. And but it's okay. It's not bad. It's quite heavy. It's got a pretty good weight in it. So a sword needs to needs to want to roll forwards, so the blade always wants to go forward. And of course, a lot of the quality of a sword depends on the structure. If you look at earlier on the video on the channel, you'll see a video where I explain about how this all fits together. I'm not sure which video. I think it's like things that go on backstage in the school or something like that. But then you'll see one of these all taken to pieces. And this is a constant maintenance thing to keep the handle solid, you know, make sure that the hilt doesn't fall off, because it's just pieced together like a jigsaw, really. You know, it's just a few pieces. So yeah, if you look at that video earlier, you'll be able to check that out. Now, if you follow us regularly, you'll know that I have quite a lot of pretty high level kids in my school who are all working, you know, to a pretty high competition level. So these swords are too big for the kids, but it's pretty difficult to get swords for children, children's size. You can get them, you know, in Henan in China, because there's so many Shaolin schools up there around Dongfeng. But it's pretty difficult in the West to get a real ideal size. So this is one little tiny one. So if you see, this was the middle size broadsword, which I said was about right for my size. But then if you look at this one, you'll see that it's a much smaller sword. So this is one that I chopped down, actually, from a pretty cheap floppy adult sword, and then just grinded it off, cut it down with some heavy duty cutters. It's a bit ratty now because it's been used loads. But this is for what my little kids use. So this one's about as long as my arm. So that's, you know, this is part of a double set that I made for our kids. So when you see our little superstars out competing, they'll be using one of these. But those are, you know, like I said, I had to make that especially. In this job, you want to be able to work metal, you know, because you're constantly having to repair and polish these swords and, you know, keep them in some kind of shape. Okay, so those are some different broadswords. And now I want to show you a real broadsword. So this is my broadsword, which was a gift from one of my advanced students, Sifu Leo over in the UK. And this is a monster. So this is kind of based on what an original sword would have been back in the 1800s, going out to battle. So here we go. This is a real broadsword. Now you can see that this is really thick. If I put that up to the camera, you can see that. You know, and it's a different kind of metal altogether. This one is really solid. It weighs somewhere in the region of about 7 kilos, I would say. And when you hold this, it just wants to go. It just wants to attack. I mean, look at that tip. This is like really a deadly piece of machinery here. And you see the ridges here. See, so sometimes on a sword you'll see that, and it's kind of just a line scratched in the metal to give the impression. But this is actually pretty deep. These I don't know what you'd call them, runoffs. Yeah, they're runoffs basically for the blood to run down, and then that will all collect up inside there inside the hilt. So, you know, someone who was regularly out of war, then there's probably this piece of the hilt here would be filled up with dried blood. Nice, huh? And this thing is really heavy. So when my advanced students reach instructor level, we have a kind of a fun thing we always do in the school where the guys have to play the standard broadsword form, but with this weapon. So, you know, you really need to have good connection and body strength to be able to use something like this. Otherwise, it's going to really take your arm off. So this is like a real proper broadsword. These are, you know, something like this is pretty rare to come across these days. Most of the stuff that you'll find online is pretty commercial, and it's not going to last more than a couple of years if you use it a lot. But something like this, so this is at least, I think this is like 20 years old, 25 years old maybe. Leo gave this to me a long time ago. And this is just an amazing sword. So if the zombie apocalypse happened, this is what one of the things I would take out with me when I went shopping. I'll show you some of the other things later. So broadswords, obviously single broadsword we're looking at now. You know, you can also have double broadsword, obviously one in each hand, which is more of an advanced technique. You know, you can learn that after a few years basic training, maybe after 5-6 years basic training, you could be doing double pretty well. We'll look at that in another video. So I just want to show you a couple of the standard techniques that are used in single broadsword. So obviously this is like a butcher's knife. So you slice with this thing. See? You don't want to chop too much with it. You know, try to chop a piece of steak with the end of the knife and see what happens. You just make a mess of that. So you need to slice. And, you know, it has flowers in it that we use. So reverse flowers like this, what we're regarding either side of the head defensively, you know, and then we could come back and attack there. We have a thing called the triple flower, which is off of the hip there. You know, that's a little bit more difficult to get used to. And the wrapping. So the wrapping, you know, a very traditional wrapping technique. So this is very important that this touches on your body, because it's actually your guard against an attack. So whenever you see this, it should be touching and then come over the head, so you're still touching and then come off. You know, sometimes you'll see people wrap like this, but that's just, they didn't learn the authentic technique properly. Okay, so the wrapping is important to get down. You see, it's all wrist and hip connection. So the energy of a broadsword should be fierce and fast like a tiger and dynamic. So that just takes a bit of practice. But wherever you train, if you're in a Kung Fu school, you know, this is one of the standard things. After you learn some stick techniques, we'll look at that. We'll look at different stick techniques in another of these series. But broadsword is a standard Chinese weapon, okay, for the foot soldier going into the battle. These guys would be out there hacking away at boom, slicing off arms, things like that. Okay? Next video we'll look at one of the other standard weapons. For now, see you on the next video.